Welcome to the Disruptive Social Care Podcast with social care provocateur and social media queen Shirley Ayres and myself, Stuart Arnott, founder of Mindings, a service dedicated to bringing social media to the disconnected. In this weekly show, we aim to spread the word about what's going on in the world of disruptive social care, amplify the voices of people with great ideas that few people have ever heard about, help our communities connect and collaborate, and interview thought leaders across the sector. Well, Shirley, hello.
Hi, Stu.
Show number Lucky 13.
Yeah, Lucky 13. I did actually tweet out this week a big thank you to all the guests that we've had on our podcasts so far. Such a fascinating selection. We're covering such a wide area.
Yeah, they've been great. I've really enjoyed doing them.
And of course, we have a guest here with us today to explore yet more issues to do with digital technology and inclusion.
We certainly do, and I'm personally delighted to have as our guest this week Antony Ribot. He's at the forefront of user experience design, and as well as being a great admirer of his work, I've been very fortunate to share the stage with him on a couple of conferences, and I've always enjoyed his insights. So, a bit about Antony. Antony Ribot is an MSc in Evolutionary and Adaptive Systems from the University of Sussex. I believe that included studying termites, but we'll ask him about that later. He cut his design teeth at tomato, which is pretty much as good as it gets. If you work in television and say tomato, people just go, blurry text. That's a little television inside joke.
I might come back on that one, Stu.
But it's true. After a couple of years at Future Platforms, Antony, who's known on Twitter as Ribot Maximus, which is one of the coolest Twitter handles ever, founded the highly regarded ideas lab Ribot with his brother Jerome Ribot Minimus. I'm assuming you're his big brother.
I'm the evil, big, nasty brother, yes.
Okay. And he's worked with clients such as Orange Labs, Microsoft, Nokia, Samsung and lastminute.com. But probably their most well-known work, though, is the phenomenal Tesco mobile app, which is ever expanding and improving. And I was just looking at the website last night. Loads more functionality that you keep adding to it.
Yes. And we've got other things up our sleeve.
Ooh, okay. So your byline was certainly, when a video I was watching the other night, simple, usable, functional software tools for small screen devices. So, Antony, I know that you regard design as art rather than science, and design simplicity is at the core of your work. Is that a conflict? Can they complement each other?
I certainly don't think it's a conflict. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's actually, in my eyes, a symbiotic relationship. The science part provides us with the constraints, the rules, and without that, I think, we wouldn't have a focus, actually. And the reason why Ribot was set up in the first place was that we wanted a new challenge, and that challenge was small screen, and having come from the web. And we were frustrated by the number of features and functionality and the general, what's the word?
Clutter
of the interface. And we thought our purpose in life as a studio will be to unclutter these interfaces, to keep things as simple as possible. And that's still the same today, be it on small screen, be it on slightly larger tablet devices, or even 80-inch devices.
Oh, okay. Keep an eye out for that. Now, this is the Disruptive Social Care Podcast, and I still to this day get asked, what do you mean by disruptive? I think they think it's us being, provocateurs or saboteurs or something like that, but we're always looking for a definition of that. And I've heard you talking about how the cordless kettle disrupted the entire kettle market. That's pretty much the definition of disruption. And that was something that was originally designed for seniors. Something that was virtually a disability aid suddenly became a design classic, a design standard, in fact. So how do you define disruptive? Is it something you aspire to? And how do you make something disruptive?
Someone once said something to me that went along the lines of, only dead ducks go with the flow. again, one of the reasons why we set up the studio was to go against the grain, that we have a constant fight against complexity. And the way that we try and disrupt is by trying to keep things as simple as possible. It's as simple as that. And I guess we look at a lot of our competitors or just companies around the world, and it's the one thing that we see is the kind of the rate of change, the learning, the ability to change direction is so slow, and that's one of the reasons why we've grown over the last 6 years. We're 15 people, but we're still very flexible, and are constantly learning day after day after day, and that's what interests me and what excites me.
Yeah. So going against the flow and being disruptive, and it reminded me of a conference we were at together, Senior Market Mobile, a while ago, and there were a lot of people there presenting senior phones for the senior market, and we were talking about afterwards how they all kind of talked a good game, but at the end of the day, they're still on their stand. We're still selling plastic phones with big buttons.
Yeah,
and I wasn't really seeing much innovation beyond that. Development that you're doing that we'll speak about later on was by a long chalk the most interesting innovation there that day. And what was curious to me was Panasonic was there, and they were re-entering the mobile phone market for the first time in a long time, and we're bringing out an Android phone. And I said to the chap in the stand, "So, what new are you bringing to the table? What innovation? What are you doing differently from everybody else?" And it was, I don't know. So it's just going to be vanilla Android, yeah, pretty much. And I always think. I was saying this to Mike Clark earlier from in Telecare, and that if you're going to come into the market, do something completely different. In fact, do the opposite. Just do the opposite to see what happens, and maybe something will stick, rather than just trying to get a tiny bit of market share.
Can I just ask what vanilla Android is?
Oh, vanilla Android, sorry. Basically, the
Android...
Very
tasty.
Basically...
Non-techie alert!
Basically, the Android operating system on mobile phones, but without adding anything extra to it. People like Samsung put their own layer of software on the top that make it easier to use, a more interesting experience, but they were just doing that and nothing else. So anyway, on that point, do you think that you should just come in and just do something drastically different, just do the opposite? What do you think of that?
I mean, having given a talk at that conference, the one reason why we gave a talk was to showcase our thinking, and in that room were our competitors essentially. But I think you have to have the view that ideas are relatively cheap. It's actually very hard to produce things and get things out there. It's even hard for us. And the product that we've been working on has been in design and development for almost 2 years. And in my eyes, that actually is a shame. It will soon be out, and we'll talk about it more later. But hopefully, our participation in that event would inspire other people, and we know we can't do what we want to do alone. And so if we can inspire others and give others ideas, then hopefully the industry as a whole can take a great step forward. Great,
yeah, I can so empathise. I'm in the very same situation too. We've hinted at it. You developed Threedom, which is the world's first 3-button phone. Basically, a software application that takes over an Android phone, resulting in a phone with many of the features of a smartphone, but incredibly simple and, importantly, intuitive to use. How did that come about? Tell us a bit about it, and how did you develop it?
Once upon a time... It was roughly 2 years ago where we had just launched the Tesco mobile application, and a project that took 6 months to design and build made its money back for Tesco in just under a week.
Wow.
So we'd felt like we'd cracked the retail thing, and we wanted a new challenge, and somehow this opportunity came into our inbox to look into how we could improve touchscreen devices for dexterity impaired people. Now, we hadn't really even considered anything to do with this before, but we thought we're a family of people passionate about ideas and getting ideas out, but working on realistic ideas. And what it transpired into was a technology strategy board funded feasibility study to look into that particular problem. How could we improve the touchscreen device for dexterity impaired people? And we didn't really know what to expect, but very quickly, I still think about my involvement on it, and it gives me a kind of a tingle in my body. It was very eye-opening. It was actually very emotional as well. We conducted interviews and research with people of differing abilities, and learned many things in a short amount of time. That amount of time was roughly about only a month. But one thing that stuck in my mind was that whoever you are, you still have aspirations for well-designed products. And why should someone with an impairment have to have only the option of purchasing something that looks ugly? And so,
has limited functionality.
So that was the start of the story. The project didn't get round to the next set of funding from the TSB, and so was parked. The main part of our business is in service work, and this wasn't really. We weren't really doing this for money, but we were doing this to learn. And it was only until 6 months later where we'd won a few contracts in a specific week, and I'd mentioned this most emotional project. And on the second or third time that I mentioned it struck me that we can't keep it in a drawer, and we need to get it out there. We need to learn. We don't know the questions to ask. So we set aside some time and resource and decided to design it from the ground up, build it from the ground up, and start to get feedback from people, and eventually release it. We didn't know what it would end up as. Going back, the whole point of Threedom was that if you looked at the market, there's the iPhone, which is a great device, a very accessible device. It's still the creme de la creme, really. But there's a few key issues with it. One, it's actually priced out of many people's budgets, and two, it's actually not simple enough. If you look at that home screen, look at the number of buttons on that screen, and it's just simply not simple enough. And so we set about trying to create something that was affordable and simpler. So we chose to go down the route of Android, which provides an open operating system. You can get devices for, if not free, £10, and then open it up to people, see what ideas that they had. And so it's been a very eye-opening journey. It's had highs, it's had lows, as with any story. And we're now at the point of nearly being ready for public release. So we've gone through a number of rounds of usability sessions. We've got 2,000 people on our waiting list and people waiting to provide feedback to us, which is great. And it's generally very exciting, and we're looking forward to learning more and it being taken in other avenues.
What's been the biggest eye-opener for you about doing this project?
The biggest eye-opener? It's very hard to design something simple. It's so Threedom, as its name suggests, is a little bit of a play on words. It's meant to be to give people freedom. It's also designed around 3 buttons. the 3 buttons on the it only has 3 buttons.
Talk us through that. I know this is mostly an audio program, but
Sure.
if you can talk us through literally how it works.
Sure. So there's one big button in the top half of the interface. That button could be classed as the positive button. Then there's a negative, which is a back, and then there's a neutral, which is next. And you use those 3 buttons to cycle around the particular actions of the phone. So with the phone, you can make a phone call, send a text message. In our studies, though, we don't just use 3 buttons by sending text message. In the process of sending a text message, we've got a custom keyboard because 3 buttons was too few.
How about pre-programmed text messages? Is that
we've got templated texts as well. We've got music, so the ability to play black music. The camera app is actually, that was one of the surprising elements, where it's just a 3-button camera and you just tap on the screen to take a photo, and people seem like, wow, this is that's the thing, that's the one function really that seems to stand out for people, because prior to that they were really unable to take photos. It was too complex. So that's been one of the eye openers, actually.
Great. So where is it now? Is it an app that we can use? Are people waiting for it? Are you speaking to hardware companies or service providers? Can you tell us where it's at?
So our original ambition was to release it actually as a operating system. So we've done a lot of work digging into the deeper realms of Android, which allows us to provide richer functionality to users, and so that Threedom is the phone. Threedom is the only thing on the phone, and that's still our ambition. And we've got that ready, really, but that requires partnerships with device manufacturers, hardware manufacturers. Those partnerships and discussions take a long time, and for us, we're in the field of trying to learn as quickly as possible. I think we're still really just at the start of things. So on the other side, we've designed and built it as an app, and it will hopefully be available to download in January on the Android Play Store.
Yeah, great. So, part of the reason our paths keep crossing is because we're doing very similar things, and I know we've been speaking to similar, if not the same people, because I know that with Mindings, what people want is just something in a box. They just want something in a box. They open up, switch on, and it just works. And like yourselves, the closest that we can get to at the moment is we're on Google, got an app on Google Play, and then hopefully that's the way. But that's really the way to innovate: is get something out there rapidly, get people using it, iterate, develop.
Yep.
That's the way. And then eventually the big boys, the big hardware companies will catch up, see that you're onto something, and collaborate with you.
Yes. We've learned an awful lot in the last 2 years. And there's an example I give of why work on a product that doesn't go out, why work on a 6-month project where you only start learning on the end of that 6 months? Yes. Start learning as soon as possible. Start learning at the first day. I don't know if you've talked about the lean startup before.
Yeah. It's available on our bookstore. Click on the website, go to the bookstore, the Lean Startup, Eric Rees, great book.
Yep. So those assumptions, list those assumptions, work out how you can measure them, then work out what you need to build to test those assumptions and learn within a day. We call that spiking, when we try and spike on many different things in a given day.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got a couple of people who helped us develop the calendar. We completely rebuilt the calendar from scratch because it just wasn't working. It was too simple. And so we spoke to a couple of users who were using them, who have relatives with Alzheimer's, and really said to them what would be useful, what would help you do better. And the first thing that came back was, well, you've made an assumption that one person controls this whole account, one person controls this calendar. If you have a person, particularly at the more acute end of care, who the chances are they're not going to be cared for by just one person. It's going to be a collaborative effort. There's going to be multiple people involved. I think, was it you saying the other day about 13 people or something?
Potentially,
involved,
yes.
Wow.
in care with a relative. It was, so this has to be a calendar that multiple people can access and edit. Wow, that was a challenge. But the easiest way to do it was just to make it compatible with iCal and Google Calendar. So we built that integration right there, and great feedback. Now, in theory, Mindings isn't available in a box yet, but we've gone through that learning and we've developed it with users. So that's kind of that definition of, iterate, develop as you're going along.
Yeah.
So a question is about music, because it's something that when I'm presenting Mindings, I often get asked, and it's a question that does make me laugh. And that's, our generation understands technology, so digital exclusion is a problem that will just go away. We won't have a problem using computers when we're older. I just think that's hilarious. I mean, I have my thoughts on that, but I wonder what your thoughts were. Bearing in mind that the generation that are currently digital excluded are that clearly Luddite generation that put a man on the moon and invented the computer. So what do you think about that?
I look forward to future Luddite generations. I think, again, going back to one of our passions and what we do in our day-to-day jobs is we hide technology. That's making things invisible is our aim. And that's part and parcel of what we're trying to do with Threedom. You look at the industry at the moment, and we're at a very interesting time where digital is meeting physical. And there was a great quote in the 1960s by a chap called Marshall McLuhan, who once said something along the lines of, technology is only an invention due to the inability of the human body. That again, that's one of the things that strikes me, and in all the things that we've created, these phones. Think about mice. I think mice and keyboards, especially mice. We will laugh about mice in the future because they're such an abstract thing. And now that we've got touchscreens, now that we're interacting directly with digital interfaces, we have to learn one less thing. So there's a lovely story of my own mother Ribot, who needed a new laptop, and but also needed a new phone. Her laptop could be described as frustrating and a frustrating experience. But fundamentally, so we thought back then, before Threedom was available, she now has a Threedom phone, by the way. But back then, before Threedom was available, we thought iPhone or some nice laptop, a MacBook. But actually, it kind of didn't make that much sense. And we thought, what about the iPad? And looking at the price point, there wasn't that much difference. But what ultimately helped us to make that decision was that I looked at my tablet device, put my two hands on it, and just realized that it was the size of my two hands, and implicitly that's going to be a much more usable device. And so, long story short, we purchased it for her birthday. She was ecstatic. But then that led to a whole host of other behaviours that we didn't predict. She started playing Angry Birds, eBaying things. I was actually worried what we'd created here, because she was using the iPad so much that she was running the battery down every day. I thought, I'm both happy and sad at the same time. One thing with that story was that she, in a later conversation, she described that device as her third hand, and that was amazing. I said, "Mother, thank you. I will use that in my speeches around the world."
Yes.
And then she said something to me that I never thought that I would expect, and she said she had completed Angry Birds.
Oh,
and
my goodness!
Now this is something that both my brother and I had tried to get her into in terms of just games for 30 years. We tried various things, even the Wii and Guitar Hero, but even those things she'd only play when the boys came back home. But this we didn't need to preempt her and say, time to play Angry Birds. She was addicted, and she was just downloading, purchasing, what have you. And that was amazing, and that was roughly 2 years ago, and she hasn't opened the laptop since.
Taking brain training to the next level.
So part of your learning curve, you're starting with certain assumptions about how it would be used.
Yes.
And then when you put the device in someone's hand and they think, oh, I can do this and I can do that. It's a debate I have with people. To me, technology is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself.
No.
And although I talk about technology and I'm a great promoter of the value of digital technology, I'm afraid techie talk... Don't look at me like that, Stuart. It does turn me off a little bit. But, that practical application, the value and the benefits, I think we really need to be promoting much more rather than the UX system, personally.
Absolutely. And it's something that I talk about as well in terms of Telecare, is that I have the ability, and I do, to fill my dad's house with webcams and trip switches and microphones and stuff in order that I can monitor and control him. And the reason that you do that is because from that I get outputs back that lets me know that he's alive and well and interacting with the world. But with Mindings, I can send him a picture of my daughter and I get a message back to say he's received it. I know he's alive and well and interacting with the world. I send him a text message. I send him a calendar reminder. And I send him a little thing about a story I'm reading on the BBC. I get messages back, he's alive and well and interacting with the world. And I've done that without stripping of his dignity and without monitoring and controlling him and without putting devices in his home that constantly is a reminder to him that he's unable to look after himself and the next time he falls down the stairs he's going in a home.
And it's also very intrusive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That level of monitoring.
Yeah. So, there you go. I have a rant every week. I have another one. I've been saving this one up. So, the concept behind Mindings is that we've designed it to give the user maximum access to communication tools that we all take for granted. So, text messaging, photo sharing, online calendars, all plethora of social media. All on a screen that they don't need to touch. If you wish. It has some interactivity, but if you wish. Everything we do, we make it so that it can be worked in this ambient, completely passive mode. So in some ways, the ultimate user experience. You don't have to learn to use it. If you remember how on your Palm Pilots you had to learn graffiti. Remember that? So you had pen strokes. You had to learn a new alphabet in order to communicate with the device. And now we're talking to them. Anyway, I reckon that in our busy world, it's not just technology-shy seniors that will want to access this stuff passively. I reckon it's you and I.
Yep, I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, there just isn't enough time to actively sit down and take in all of this stuff in. So I want it to be on a screen on the wall or in the fridge door. I mean, effectively, the cordless kettle. Designed for seniors, but the simplicity becomes aspirational, which I think is a great design cue. Anyway, so with this information overload, or probably better described as filter failure, can you see a trend for people wanting simplicity?
Yes. You mentioned data overload, and it's a really big concern of mine. If you go back to Roman times, there were people called centurions. Now, centurions commanded, you'd think, an army of 100 soldiers. Actually, the number was, I think, 81, 82. But that number was a very special number. It was the number of social connections that centurion could still have a good relationship over. And I still think that value hasn't really changed today. Now, many of us have 500 plus Facebook friends, but actually I think we've still got 81, 82 real connections. And so with this, with the amount of data coming in, I do worry in terms of how it's affecting our day-to-day lives. Now, there's a great book called Focus that I managed to read in one night. Actually, it's only 123 pages or something like that. But essentially, I think we're run too much on data. We're not designed to be looking at these alerts every so often, actually not every so often, nearly every minute. And I think everyone would probably be scared if you look at the metrics of the number of times you check devices and data in a given day. There's a film, I don't know if you've watched, called Demolition Man.
Yep.
And there's quite a few insights in that film. It's quite, in my eyes, it's quite a classic. And there are people who have chosen not to be part of the connected life. They are the underground, offline.
The Morlocks.
Yes. But I wonder about, I mean, this is it's not like maybe a happy thought, but I wonder at what point there'll be an inflection point of people choosing to be offline. But I do worry about how data will affect our lives going forward. There's an example in South Africa at the moment, a positive example, but I think it's just the start of these things being connected, where your life insurance policy is connected to your gym membership. Now, depending on the number of times you go to the gym in a given month, you get a different pay. So if you go more than 5 times, then you pay the lower amount. And I think that's just the start. I mean, that's a very good thing. But I often think about, oh gosh, all these things connecting and us being so connected. Where's the end to it? And I do look forward to a time where I can switch off. But in the end, it's all about balance. That was a strange little ramble from me. So
apologies. Maybe digital exclusion is a good thing.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, because you did mention that you got a grant from the Technology Strategy Board. So what was your experience in getting funding to develop innovation?
In honesty, we've only ever got funding once. That was for that feasibility study. And for simplicity, we tried to get funding again for the next stage, failed, and decided to take some of the profits from the company to pour into the design and build of the product.
When you say failed, do you know why? Was there?
No.
I mean, that is a big issue, I think, for a lot of people who apply for funding. The application process is convoluted and it's very opaque.
Competitions as well, the competitions.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, actually, because I think it's about 15 philanthropy foundations in America have committed to making their whole process of decision-making more open. And I think we need that for funders here, because there doesn't sometimes seem to be a rationale about why some innovations are supported and others aren't.
Yeah. Well, things like, and also because they're competitions and they do them, so it's a particular topic for a particular period. Well, that's all very well, but I'm doing this ambient care product and you're not going to be doing that again until next November. Well, I'll be working in PC World then. It'll be too late.
Yeah.
It's not helpful.
Yeah.
So, we're thankfully in a position where we can take some of the profits and pull that into the design and build of almost like a separate company, really. So we've invested in Threedom. It's been 2 years of investment, really, and hopefully we'll be out soon, and people will be able to join in the fun.
Yeah, that's great. It's just kind of ironic that yet again it's another amazing innovation that's virtually been dependent on philanthropy. And, and it didn't need to be that way. So, what are you working on now? Anything? Oh no, okay, you're not allowed to. Okay.
Well, when's this podcast is going out?
Next Friday.
Next Friday as well. Yes. So there will probably be publicity of the 80-inch touchscreen experience by then, which is going into a well-known retail store on potentially Monday, all going well.
We'll put a post. Go to disruptivesocialcare.com and we'll put a post about it.
Super.
Presumably you'll blog about it or something.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We're dealing with
80-inch touch.
It's
screen.
very interesting. Again, it's this physical and digital world colliding. We're using various technologies, implicit passive technologies like the Microsoft Kinect sensor to detect people and the proximity of people with the interface. Once again, it is as simple as we could make it in the time constraints, and it's great for it to be getting out into such a public space, and then we'll be getting various bits of feedback. Looking forward to seeing what people think about it. And the other thing that we're working on in general are the whole idea of discovery. So Pinterest has been really, it's been amazing, and it's actually. Someone once said it's now providing 5 to 6% of revenue to. There's a website called fab.com which focuses on designy products. But Pinterest is providing 5 to 6% of revenue already. And again, you think about it, it's just a collection of images. Oh, that's interesting. Tap, purchase. And it's things are becoming easier, and it's great that we're now at a time where there's various, to get a little bit technical, there's various frameworks, operating systems, libraries. It's amazing. We've never had a better time, and we're now really just restricted by the idea, and hopefully people have got a little bit of money to get that idea out there, because ideas are essentially cheap. The hard thing is actually actioning that idea and getting that product out there. But very exciting times.
Yeah, in terms of social care, it's a great example and of that, of it affecting the bottom line. But clearly in social care, people can learn from that too. So people like the Healthier Living Centre that we discussed in last week's programme, with their fantastic use of social media, with using Facebook, using photographs, using videos, using audio boo as a way of spreading their message.
Absolutely, yes.
There's lots that people can learn. Social care really, really need to be embracing this technology.
Yes, I guess the interesting question is why they're so behind the curve. And I think that's an interesting point that Antony makes about lean and agile startups. And one of the problems, of course, is that we have systems that aren't actually fit for purpose, but a lot of vested interests in not wanting to change because change makes people fearful. And different approaches that are going to challenge the status quo and realistically are going to make people more independent, are going to make people more able to function in different ways, requires a mind shift. That social care isn't just for passive recipients. Care is something that we all need in our own ways, and what we're looking at is using digital technology, innovations to help us connect in communities.
So, Antony, you are going to be speaking at a conference on the 30th of November, Technology Without Limits.
Correct.
What's that about?
So they're really renaming access technology to everybody technology. And it's really lovely to be invited to speak at that event. There's a number of very interesting speakers. I'm looking forward to. It's actually the conference I'm most looking forward to over the next 12 months. Actually, I think I'll learn so much, and I'll be giving the story of Threedom, sharing the learnings, getting into a little bit more of the specifics of the learnings. And going into, I think, a debate with someone else who might try and poke around the future of Threedom.
And I'm actually attending that conference.
I'm going to try and come too.
Yes.
Finally, Antony, the termites. I mentioned the termites at the beginning of the show. I have to ask, what was all that about? And what, if any, connection do they have to what you do now?
So, at heart, I'm actually quite a simple person. And as a designer, the designer in me gets my inspiration from natural systems. And I thought, how can I understand humans if we don't understand insects, how insects work? And so many years ago, this is back in 2003, I was awarded a scholarship to study evolutionary and adaptive systems at Sussex. I call the program Ants, Bees and Termites, though, because that's what I was interested in, that's what I focused on. And looking at these relatively simple insects, you can define actually most of them with just 3 rules. And so on their own, very, very simple, you get a collection of them and this complex emergent behaviour occurs. So food foraging with ants, the waggle dance of the bee, which dictates to the rest of the colony how far away nectar is and in what angle, what direction, and the termites. The termites, again, were probably the most amazing and the most complex of those 3, and so they, with 3 rules, can produce a house, a house of mud. And most people have seen these things on nature documentaries. But what most people don't realise is that that house of mud features a self-regulating thermodynamic 3D air conditioning system. So the temperature within that house remains constant no matter the time of day and the weather conditions. That's amazing. So I take my inspiration from these natural, elegant, simple systems and try and apply that to the digital things that we create day after day. And to hide the complexities.
I think simplicity has been the keyword for today. Well, that's great. One last thing, Antony, we have our tradition, Follow Friday here, and we like to give shout-outs to people that we admire, people who we follow. Do you have any Follow Fridays for us?
I certainly do. There is the great @enabled by and @pesky people, a source of inspiration with both.
Shirley,
Excellent.
Agree with them?
Absolutely. I'm in contact with both of them, and I think they're really setting new standards.
Good stuff. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show this week. Something a little bit different, something which clearly has a connection with social care, the simplicity of design, enabling digital inclusion. So links to things that were spoken about in the show, as usual, we'll put in our show notes. So go to disruptivesocialcare.com. You may be there now watching us. And do tell your communities. And if you do, remember to use the hashtag DEUKCare. Spread the word about the show. We'd love your feedback, love to hear from you. And of course, facebook.com/Disruptive Social Care. And you can follow me at Minding Stew.
And you can follow me at Shirley Ayres. And of course, I'm just going to find out about the waggle dance of the bees.
Oh. And you can follow me on Ribot @Ribot Maximus.
Fantastic. Well, hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye-bye.